Welcome to today's explainer. We're going to be pulling back the curtain to reveal exactly how perceived safety and legitimacy are engineered in the crypto industry. If you've ever looked at the Web3 space and wondered, how on earth do certain projects effortlessly attract millions in TVL practically overnight, while fundamentally sound code just sits on GitHub completely ignored? Well, you are definitely in the right place. Today, we're breaking down the highly calculated architecture of trust. It is an absolutely fascinating look into the psychology of how we, as users, decide what's safe and what's legit in a totally decentralized world.
So, let's get right into it. How do crypto projects actually manufacture credibility? Because honestly, the answer is surprisingly simple, yet profoundly psychological. It's by making you see them absolutely everywhere. I know, it sounds almost too basic, right? But the reality is that the most successful protocols aren't necessarily the ones with the most flawless smart contracts on day one. Nope. They are the ones that have absolutely mastered the art of omnipresence. They understand that in a space as loud and fast-paced as Web3, credibility isn't just something you quietly earn in the background. It is something you actively and intentionally manufacture.
Attention shapes trust. This thought perfectly captures the core dynamic. In Web3, the more often people see your project, the safer it automatically feels to them. Just think about your own browsing habits for a second. When a new protocol crosses your feed for the very first time, your guard is up, right? You're naturally skeptical. But the third, fourth, or maybe fifth time you see it mentioned, that skepticism just starts to fade away. Psychologists actually call this the mere exposure effect. It's this cognitive bias where we develop a preference for things simply because they're familiar to us. Attention is literally the currency that buys trust in this ecosystem. It's that invisible force turning an unknown startup into what feels like a total pillar of the community. Because the truth is, credibility is engineered. Period. Those super safe feeling projects that capture all the attention, all the users, and those massive inflows of capital, they didn't get there by accident. Their credibility is built piece by piece, appearance by appearance. They don't just launch, cross their fingers, and hope you'll stumble upon their technical docs. No way. They run highly orchestrated campaigns. It's the coordinated Discord drops, the perfectly timed Twitter threads from key voices, the sudden wave of newsletter mentions. It is a deliberate, highly systematic process of building an aura of inevitability around a brand.
All right, let's dive into our first major section, the great Web3 myth, and unlearning the traditional roadmap. So the traditional Web2 founder operates on this really persistent myth, which is if you build a great product, users will magically find it and trust will eventually naturally follow. But in Web3, that formula is completely backwards. The reality of the space dictates that you have to capture attention first. That attention is what actually builds the trust, and only then do the users arrive. You literally cannot afford to sit around and wait for trust to naturally develop after adoption. The trust must physically be constructed before a user ever decides to connect their wallet. Simply put, familiarity creates trust. We are biologically wired to fear the unknown. And honestly, in Web3, the unknown usually translates to the very real fear of getting rugged. If a founder tries to skip that visibility phase, they're fighting an uphill battle against human nature and market trauma. I mean, you could have the most revolutionary cryptography in the world, but if your brand isn't familiar to the market, it's going to be perceived as highly risky. Familiarity is that vital bridge taking a user from, wait, is this a scam, to, okay, I need to ape into this right now. Which brings us to our next section, the architecture of trust and engineering authority. So how exactly do these projects systematically manufacture this authority? Well, they use a highly calculated framework called visibility stacking, and this concept completely shifts how audiences perceive a project. It's not about just getting one massive feature in a major crypto publication and calling it a day. Instead, it is the strategic layering of appearances. It's about creating this complete surround sound effect, where everywhere a potential investor looks, they see a signal that this project is active, accepted, and moving forward. It's the intentional, relentless accumulation of trust signals. Let's break down how this actually works through strategic layering. First, you secure media placements. Then, you back those up with a steady drumbeat of PR announcements. Next, you layer in partnership news to show you're collaborating with respected entities. Add in some key opinion leaders amplifying the message to their loyal audiences. And finally, you secure ecosystem mentions where other established protocols are talking about you. When you stack all of these together, it creates an impenetrable wall of social proof. It literally makes it look like the entire industry has suddenly reached a consensus about your project. And that's because repeated exposure equals legitimacy. By stacking these appearances, people eventually stop questioning the project and simply start assuming it's legit. Think about the sheer power of that transition for a second. They stop asking, "Is this real?" and start asking, "How do I get involved?" Repeated exposure literally exhausts our skeptical defenses. When a user sees your media placement on Monday, a prominent voice talking about you on Wednesday, and a big partnership announcement on Friday, their brain connects those dots for them. The equation is solved subconsciously. Repeated exposure equals unquestioned legitimacy. Let's move along to our next section, redefining attention and risk, looking closely at the psychology of visibility. The thing to remember here is that visibility drastically reduces risk. We aren't just trying to look impressive for the sake of founder ego. The ultimate goal here is to drastically reduce the perceived risk for investors and users. In crypto, risk is the ultimate friction point, right? Every single time someone interacts with a new protocol, signs a smart contract, or provides liquidity, they are taking a massive leap of faith. Visibility acts as this psychological safety net. It tells the user's brain, hey, look, lots of other reputable people and platforms are engaging with this. It's safe. You are utilizing attention to actively dismantle the perception of danger. Let's walk through exactly how this psychological chain reaction works. Step 1, as an investor keeps seeing your project everywhere, their confidence naturally increases. Step 2, because they feel more confident, their entire perception of the project changes. It upgrades from a risky little startup to an established player. And step 3, that change perception transforms their behavior. They invest, they participate, they become an advocate. This 3-step escalation is exactly how you make a project feel bigger, safer, and just completely irresistible to the broader market. Okay, let's jump into our final section, the distribution engine and compounding credibility. The projects that stay relevant stay visible. This is absolutely key. To maintain that feeling of being an established project, you have to realize that constant visibility requires really wide distribution. You cannot stack visibility if you don't have the pipes to distribute your narrative across the internet. Being seen once, that's a spike. Staying visible, that is a strategy. If you drop out of the conversation for even a month in Web3, people just assume you've stopped building. Relevance is completely tied to a relentless, unyielding distribution of your progress. And according to the source material, this is exactly where specialized distribution networks like Web3 PR Wire become crucial infrastructure. Rather than just shouting into the void, projects use these networks to plug their news directly into established ecosystems. By appearing consistently across trusted platforms, they create this incredible compounding effect. Every new announcement builds systematically on the foundation of the last one. It is a deeply mathematical approach to engineering that much-needed trust over time. The crucial takeaway here is that distribution builds authority. Leveraging these platforms isn't just marketing, it is actively manufacturing your brand safety profile. Marketing is usually thought of as simply trying to sell a product, right? But building authority through distribution is entirely different. It is about laying down a massive digital paper trail of success and momentum that anyone doing due diligence will inevitably trip over. Distribution is literally the foundational infrastructure of your authority. Because at the end of the day, visibility creates credibility. If you want to engineer trust around your project, and if you want to successfully acquire users and capital, you absolutely must commit to being seen. You have to flip the script from let's build in stealth to let's build in the spotlight. In Web3, the community essentially is the product, so hiding from them entirely negates your purpose. Visibility isn't just a happy byproduct of credibility. As the research shows, visibility is the very thing that creates that credibility from the ground up. So I'll leave you with this final, somewhat provocative thought to ponder as you navigate the space. In an ecosystem built purely on network effects, if nobody sees your project, does it even really exist? You could have the greatest code on the planet, but without visibility, you are totally invisible to the market. Thank you so much for joining me on today's Explainer. Keep building, and make sure you build visibly.
Subscribe and visit Web3 Newswire for visibility and credibility of your Web3 projects.